Hey everybody, welcome back. We're the Menschwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit under the weather, so you might hear me with a little bit of a NPR voice tonight.
Ah,
Jazz
okay.
FM voice, as our producer Michael said.
I'll bring the
Um,
energy. You can have the Dan Castellaneta on Parks and Rec.
yeah.
Subdued tones.
So am
We're
I am I Crazy Ira or the douche tonight?
no, you're neither. You're Gil Chesterton's
Yeah,
restaurant
restaurant
reviews.
beat.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'm Bob Bulldog Briscoe. Um,
Right.
I hope everyone's doing well. Some interesting stories in the world of Jews and sports we want to get to. I think top of mind right now, as we're recording this, is the incidents that have happened over the
You
weekend
know, I
in
was going to say,
Amsterdam.
Jamie, I wasn't sure which one of us was going to discuss this sort of lead off the story, but I think we could split it. In other words, let's go Dutch. That's how we'll start the
Oh
show
wow!
tonight.
So I should say that there's limits to our reportage, and we've been reading along with everybody else about what's been going on in Amsterdam. Just to give some basic background on it, Maccabi Tel Aviv was playing Ajax in a Europa League group stage game in Amsterdam. Ajax actually has a reputation as being sort of the Jewish
Being the
Dutch
most
team.
Jewish club. This is for Dutch Jews. This was like the moment.
Yeah,
This is the game. It's a big deal for I guess any sort of Northern European Jew to come by and see it. I think a lot of German fans who are Jewish with Jewish families support Ajax for that same reason. Estonia, Finland, all sort of in that area.
that's right. There were a large number of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters, largely from Israel, who traveled to Amsterdam to watch the game, I guess be part of the festivities. There were some ongoing provocation between Israeli fans and I don't know, anti-Israel, let's
So
say, supporters.
what's
Uh,
really interesting, what's interesting about this is it doesn't seem to be a clash between Ajax fans and Maccabi fans. It is
no,
a clash between Maccabi fans and sort of the general Amsterdam like protest scene.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like Amsterdam Jews were targeted, but Israeli fans were. Other people who were just in the vicinity who were not Jewish, who were accused of helping the Israeli fans or thought they were Jews, seemed to have been attacked. Ultimately, 5 people were hospitalized. I think I saw reports that another several dozen had minor injuries. Israel ended up sending several flights back to Amsterdam to evacuate all the Israeli fans. Um,
Hmm.
People have reported this as being a pogrom. I think that's fairly strong language. Look, on the other side, I think people have just said, "Oh, this is just soccer hooligans," and no story here. I don't think that's the case either. This
No, I think it's
clearly
got to be
seems to be a
somewhere
unique
in the
situation.
middle.
It did occur around the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which seems to have been top of mind for the Dutch authorities, and there seems to have been some significant security failures. I
I,
think that the stories are still coming out about it as we're talking
yes,
about it
we're
now.
still learning. It's interesting to see sort of some of the reactions. Like there's been sort of I would say surprisingly wall to wall coverage of the BBC in the BBC of this situation. I think that they have a pretty solid soccer hooliganism beat,
Right.
and soccer violence is like a very it's a tale as old as time in Europe. I mean, about as old as anti-Semitism is soccer violence.
Sure.
And as the two of them, where the twain shall meet, in Amsterdam this week, I think, as you said, it is both. It is a to a lot of people to be both a loud soccer fan and visibly Jewish.
Right.
And I think what you get not necessarily soccer hooligans, but people who are looking for a fight against people who are willing to give it to them.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
I think that's
and
fair.
you throw a little anti-Semitism in the mix, which is definitely present. It escalates a lot quicker.
Yeah. Look, I'm not trying to split hairs here. I do think there was a specific focus on the fact that it was an Israeli team and there were Israeli fans.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not suggesting that this wasn't motivated by anti-Semitism. There was provocation to some degree. It seems like from the Maccabi fans, and again, there is some history of them being provocative. Whether the sort of provocation, shouting slogans, singing songs, uh, whether that is a reasonable basis for a physical attack. I mean, I would come down strongly on the side of no, of course not. And I think this was a organized, anti-Semitic attack. There's no other way to put it. Anything else is sort of commentary. And I think the more salient, well, not the more salient story, but a salient element of this has been the sort of silence of UEFA, FIFA, like the governing bodies of sports, because they don't really care. Like, honestly, no. I think they would feel more at ease just banning Israel altogether. I think there's be lots of pushback on that, but I think because there's a lot of constituent countries that are comprised of people who don't care much for Israel, historically, and maybe right now more than ever, there's not a lot of support for Israel or Israeli teams, and that's troubling. I mean, I think it's this is very much in the sadly increasing narrative of simply being Israeli in the world or being Jewish in the world is too difficult for people to handle, or will lead to some direct pushback from other elements of society. And I think people not knowing how to deal with that, not knowing how to deal with those feelings, and as we often do, quoting Dave Baddiel, it does really feel like just a Jews don't count moment. If this was fans of a Nigerian team coming to play in Amsterdam and they were attacked in this way, with sort of an anti-African or anti-migrant or anti-Nigerian slogans, the global pushback on this would be overwhelming.
I want to quote something David Baddiel said about this 2 days ago.
Sure.
Where he said, a lot of people on here being Twitter, feeling the need to insist that throwing into canals, attempted stabbings, head stamping, and hunting down of Jews this week in Amsterdam is provoked by bad behavior of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. Well, good to know that in this instance, everyone is okay with disproportionate retaliatory violence.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well. And look, I think it's ultimately this was, we can say with luckily no one was killed, and the injuries appear not to have been lasting for anyone who was involved. But still, I think this is something to keep an eye for. And I would say it is the most significant instance of anti-Semitism in soccer that hasn't been provoked by, let's say, white supremacist ideology. And yes, we've talked on this podcast several times. We've had Dave Goss on, soccer journalist and reporter and commentator, talk about anti-Semitism in sports, in soccer. It has mostly been of the skinhead variety, right? It has often been, English skinheads taking the Mickey out of Tottenham supporters.
There's never-ending experience. I mean, good use of taking the Mickey, but there's never-ending stories of like some second-tier Greek soccer player, Heil Hitlering the crowd after scoring a goal. Like that always happens.
But this was not that. This was from a purportedly pro-Palestinian sentiment. That was the basis of this. So, anyways, look. I think there's a limit to what we can say about this. Obviously, I think our listeners know what side we are on of this. It's worth understanding that. Yeah, it's worth understanding the caveats and knowing about this. But unfortunately, I think this is something we're going to have to continue to talk about in the coming years. We talked about it a little bit with the Olympics and things associated with that. International sports brings the worst out of people sometimes.
And it's important to remember also that like soccer games have been used as a cover for violence for a very, very, very long time and will continue to be so. It's entirely possible that those who are, as I mentioned, those who are looking for anti-Semitic violence use the Israelis being in town for the soccer game as the opportunity so they would have the cover they need. That's sort of what I was getting at earlier. And I think that could be an explanation for a lot of this violence.
Anyways, let's move on to some more positive news. We should say we do have an interview coming up in the second half of this podcast with Justine Siegal. Very excited to be joined by her. Justine is a baseball player and coach, and she is the founder, along with Toronto's own Keith Stein, of the Professional Women's Baseball League, which is going to be starting to play soon. It was very nice to talk to her, talk about her career in baseball, getting women involved in the sport, her Jewish upbringing, and really just what's involved with getting a league together. It's a huge undertaking, and there's going to be 6 teams going
And
soon.
she's not just as a Jewish, baseball executive coach. She's sort of a trailblazer in a lot of ways. She was, the first ever woman to coach a professional baseball team, first ever woman to coach on an MLB team, first ever woman to throw batting practice in an official MLB scenario. Like, she is, if there's anyone who's got sort of the cachet and the experience to start a league like this, it's her.
Absolutely.
And she's Jewish.
And she's Jewish, yes, as is her co-founder. And we'll see. They are going to be franchises in the league, so we'll see. I'm sure there will be some other Jewish involvement and Jewish players.
Can the Menschwarmers buy an ad? Can we get like a jersey sponsorship for one of these teams?
I don't know if we can do jersey sponsorship. Maybe not jersey sponsorship. Maybe an ad in a program. I think there won't be a Toronto. There won't be a Toronto team for now, but maybe in the future. Anyways, before we get to that, let's just wrap up some Jewish sporting news from the last little while.
Big news of the NHL. Zach Hyman finally got a goal. Took him about 10, 12 games to score a goal, but he's got 3 in his last 4 games. So it looks like Hyman's, he's picking it back up. We love to see it.
Is this a hangover from last year's, playoff run, having to play an extra 20 games, or is this just, sometimes you don't score for a few days?
I think it's both. I mean, the team is off to a not good start, but they were last year too. And then sort of they were the best team in the league in the second half. But it's also, sometimes the puck doesn't bounce your way.
Right.
Last year, it took both him and McDavid a while to heat up. And now's the time to start doing it. The seat's getting a little warm.
That makes sense. But the idea of playing, 20, let's say 20 to 28, because every NHL playoff series is a 7-game series, right?
Yeah, and they had a couple go to 7.
They had a couple go to 7. So they played an extra, 20 odd games last year. Like, instead of ending the season in April, they ended the season in July. Or late June. Like, the idea that that doesn't have an effect on you sounds crazy. Like, I think that's you're doing an extra fifth of the work of the year, a quarter of the work for the year. It's crazy to add that on, given that these guys already play 80 games. To have to play 100 seems insane.
They have
how could there
nothing
not be
left after the 104th game? But it's my guess is it's got a lot to do with that, as well as there's sort of some they know the Oilers know they're going to be there at the end of the season.
Okay.
Hyman got his 50 goals. McDavid got his 100 assists. They need to turn it on, but they have time.
Okay. So it might not be another 50-goal season, but the goal now, I assume, for everyone is, let's get a team that goes to the finals again or wins the whole thing.
Win the cup this time.
Yeah, that makes
sense. Let's win one more game than we did last year. That's all it takes.
Absolutely. Big news in college football. Jake Retzlaff, who we've talked about nonstop, keeps winning. BYU is in position to make the college football playoffs. They won a crazy game against Utah, their rival, in-state rival, last week that included a walk-off field goal. Jake didn't have the best game, but he led the comeback and they won, which is the most important thing. So BYU is pretty much in position now where they're going to make the Big 12 championship game in all likelihood. They do have 3 games left, but none of them against ranked opponents, and they'll be favored in all those games. I would say that it's likely that even if they lose the championship game, they'll make the 12-team playoff. They're sort of fighting for positioning right now. As long as they beat Kansas and Arizona State and Houston, but very exciting. It'll be the first Jewish quarterback in the college football playoff.
Something that I find very exciting. I think Jake Retzlaff. There are a lot of people who echo this sentiment. Jake Retzlaff did a thing that I didn't think was possible, which has got my father into college football.
Oh wow!
I don't think he's never been to a college football game. I don't think he's ever watched a college football game. Being a New Yorker and then a Canadian, college football was not a thing that ever mattered. But now that you see a Jewish quarterback and he's in Phoenix, he's going to the BYU ASU game in a couple of weeks. Now that there is a Jewish quarterback, he cares. He's going and he cares about Jake Retzlaff. So I'm sure there are lots of other people excited to hear about the BYU quarterback. Shocked by it.
It's too good a story, and we will continue to cover it. And another great story that we're constantly following, constantly tweeting about is Max Grazerman's ongoing run through the FedEx Cup Fall golf tournament. Leading up to the 2024
have the rankings
season.
This week come out yet?
Yes, I think they have. So just to give the backstory here, last week was the Worldwide Technology Championship. Again, not necessarily the most illustrious tournament, but Max was right in the mix. He was the clubhouse leader after round one, I believe, and he was right there on Sunday. He was 7 under on Sunday. Like he had no, I think he had a bogey, but he had a pretty mistake-free round. Is the point, and he was 2 strokes back.
He gave himself a chance to win.
Exactly. He came in 4th in the tournament, and he is now ranked 37th in the world, which, again, this guy's a rookie. He was ranked a year ago. He was ranked in the 200s, which, is still pretty great. Like that's better golfer than any of us will ever play with. But to go up, 150 odd spots in a year in his first year playing is amazing.
And that's his 4th top 5 in his last 6 tournaments too, which is even more, it's almost Scheffler-esque.
Exactly. I mean, it's a different field. There's again, the competition is a little less stiff, but still he is playing very, very well right now. I think he's going to be a big follow. And again, this is like if you're not that into golf, but you want to follow a Jewish guy, he is a great guy. He's a great player to follow. He is the child of Soviet Jews, which I think
we got to get him
unique,
on the show.
Unique in the sporting world. We'd love to have him on. Maybe when there's a bit of a downturn at the end of the year. But really excited to keep following Max and keep seeing what he's doing. He's, he is right in contention. I think he's going to have it. There's going to be one tournament, I think, where he just runs away with it because he's shooting so well.
He's going to win.
He's going
to win soon.
He has been playing so far a very high risk approach to the game, which it's golf. If you're on and you can make the shots, then it means that you're going to have some round where you go, 4 or 5 better than anyone else who's out there if you're hitting your shot. So really exciting to see Max just perform at such a high level.
And we're keeping watching Max. It's amazing to see 2 Jewish Maxes really crushing it on the PGA Tour.
Yes.
If they can play in a match play tournament one day together, you've got, both of them, Maxime or Maxis, however they, whatever we'll call it. I think it would be Maxime.
Maxibillions.
Maxibillions. Ooh, that's good when you multiply the max. Anywho, what is the main event today? Let's talk about our interview with Justine Siegal. As I sort of mentioned earlier, she is a trailblazer in many aspects of baseball, being sort of a coach, one of the first female coaches, actually the first to achieve anywhere at her level of success. As she mentioned, she's coached in Major League, she's coached in independent league, she's coached all over the world in baseball. And now I guess she's adding to her illustrious resume, league founder, commissioner, owner, all sorts of various parts of it. Jamie had a chance to sit down with her last week and chat about sort of what she's bringing to the table and what the new league is expected to do. And I think we will. I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited for the Professional Women's Baseball League. I think we're really in a moment in the last year or so for women's basketball, both at the collegiate and pro level. I think setting up a women's league for baseball gives it the chance to have something similar. It might be, the WNBA started 25 odd years ago, but it's, sort of coming into its moment now. It might take some time with women's baseball, but I think there's a real future there.
We're just at the top of the first of this program.
Exactly. Let's go now to my interview with Justine.
This is an audition to be a cantor.
But I don't want to be a cantor.
I wasn't raised with any religion. You're Jewish, though.
The heartbeat of community.
I welcomed Sam into my community by first taking his foreskin and next showing him the beautiful Twister bagel.
Culturally Jewish is the only podcast covering the weird, wide world of independent Canadian Jewish art.
Listen to Culturally Jewish at the cjn.ca/culture or wherever you get your podcasts.
Very excited to be joined today by Justine Siegal. Justine is a baseball coach and proponent, especially for women, There's Justine. You have a lot of firsts on your resume. First woman to be involved in coaching in Major League Baseball. You've been involved in Israel baseball, Israel's national baseball team, and now you are starting a new league. So we want to talk to you about that. Tell us more about the Professional Women's Baseball League.
Women haven't had a professional baseball league for over 70 years since the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And my co-founder, Keith Stein, he was so shocked to see that women didn't have a place to play professionally. And so he started a plan to make it happen. And then he reached out to me to be the baseball side of the equation. Okay. And we will be launching in 2026.
Keith Stein, I think some of our listeners might know, has recently purchased the Toronto Maple Leafs semi-pro baseball team that they play in Christie Pits. We're in Toronto. I'm a big Maple Leafs fan, at least the baseball team. It's a great activity. It's a great thing to watch. It is sort of shocking to think that there hasn't been a pro league since you mentioned the All-American Girls. That's the league from League of Their Own. That's a real thing. It's a historical document. That movie's a bit of a historical document, but that movie's 30 years old. As much of it as it might have, it developed some interest in women's baseball. It didn't really prompt anything happening here. You have been, I think it's fair to say, at the forefront of encouraging women playing baseball and specifically baseball. I mean, not that there's something wrong with softball, but that is a lot of your story seems to be about the fact that you were always pushed towards softball. Women have always been pushed towards softball, and that's not. It's not baseball. They're different. They're different sports. How did you sort of choose to focus on baseball, or what prompted you to choose to focus on baseball and women in baseball?
Well, honestly, my plan as a kid was to be a professional soccer player.
Oh wow!
I used to practice my autograph. I was going to go pro playing soccer. They didn't have women's pro soccer then either. But I was about 13 when I was told I should quit baseball because I'm a girl, and that just kind of lit the fire under me. And I just decided I would play forever. And so, I never thought my whole career would be about girls in baseball, but you can't let it go, telling a girl she can't play baseball, that's a social justice issue. And so when I had my daughter, I was just 23 when I had my daughter. So I was able to kind of say, I got to do something for the next generation.
Right.
And so here we are today.
Do you feel like things have changed a little bit in the last little while in terms of the direction women's professional sports are going? I think, we've seen the growth of the WNBA and the start of the new professional women's hockey league. That's a more stable professional women's sports environment. Is it do you feel a societal shift or is that part of what's prompting the pro baseball league?
I think both. Everyone's kind of woken up to the idea. They're seeing that women are great athletes. They've been great athletes, but now everyone's kind of seeing it. And so there's never really been a better time for women's pro sports to shine, to start, to get established. And so this was the right time to make a women's pro baseball league.
I would imagine that some of the difficulty or one of the challenges you'll face is just getting that, sort of pipeline of athletes into the pro ranks. There isn't really there isn't really college baseball for women at a high level. Obviously there's college softball, and there's some women who have played in men's teams. But what are you going to be doing about sort of getting the rosters? How are you going to be filling them? Is it going to be converted softball players? Is it going to be women who are playing on men's teams? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I founded a national nonprofit called Baseball for All, and we've been helping communities start girls baseball teams around the country. Our national tournament, we'll have 600, 700 girls playing baseball. It's our 10th anniversary. Wow. So there's thousands of girls who are playing baseball with the boys. Through Baseball for All, they get to meet other girls, which is always very magical and keeps them in the game. So I think that the women that you're going to see in the league, the majority of them will have been baseball players, whether it's at some point in their life, maybe they were 12 and they were told to quit. Or maybe they played high school baseball. I imagine most of our players are going to have played high school baseball and or played for the national team. There's over 25 countries that have women's baseball. Right. So, the players are out there. Yes, there'll be some softball players, but it's a baseball league, so we're playing baseball.
looking at your own, life, you talk about, wanting to be a pro soccer player. Was sports always a huge part of your life growing up? We often talk about, what is keeping women from and girls from being involved in sports at the same level as boys and men. And, I'm curious what the progression was for you in terms of having sports as part of your life growing up.
I loved sports. Sports was who I was. Guess who I am. But certainly there wasn't as much opportunity as there is today. I'm the only woman in my high school to have had to play two boy sports. I put in quotation marks, which was soccer and baseball.
Right.
So today, girls have all kinds of opportunities to play, whether that's lacrosse, flag football, obviously soccer, basketball, ice hockey, and half of those didn't exist for me. So it's exciting to see that girls can just be, but there's still more work to be done. And pro leagues give a pipeline, and they give an aspiration of how if you work hard, this is possible. A lot of people say, well, what about just making MLB co-ed? Which is, okay, but the goal wouldn't be to get one woman playing in Major League Baseball because she's a lefty knuckleball pitcher. We want a whole league where girls can see women playing, and women have a place where they can really showcase what they can do.
Right. That's a really interesting point. I think it's, as a boy, certainly I idolized lots of pro athletes as a kid. And I think girls have always done the same growing up, whether it's men or women, but there hasn't been the example of the professional female athlete, at least not, playing in an equivalent league to men. And I think, the WNBA has been such a revelation the last few years, or the interest in the WNBA has been such a revelation. The women have always been playing at a high level, but now there is that sort of widespread support and interest. And I think the cascade effect on young women is going to be borne out. We're seeing it being borne out. We're seeing it develop. I hope the same can be true of baseball. In terms of actually, doing. In terms of the actual work, what's actually involved? I know this was just announced recently, but what are the steps towards starting a sports league? It seems like such a huge endeavor, sort of unimaginable in scope. But what you said games in 2026. That seems far away, but it also seems like you have a year to get things together and get teams off the ground. What's going to actually be involved on a day-to-day basis?
Well, money.
Sure.
Money is always a big part. We're just securing our ownership now. We have 6 franchises. So we're just finishing up that. Our investors, getting our investors to come in.
Is it going to be like a central ownership like the PWHL, or is it going to be each franchise is owned by a different group of owners?
Our franchises will have different owners.
Okay, great.
I'm more on the baseball end than the finance end. So
sure.
My job is identifying players, getting the pipeline. How are we going to bring them together, develop them, where are they going to house, all those type of things.
It sounds like a similar story to what we've heard in the past of getting the Israel baseball team together, of just sort of like having to identify Jewish baseball players around. There isn't the same. There wasn't obviously a master list of Jewish baseball players. Now there is, but 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there wasn't. And I would imagine it's the same for women who are playing baseball at different levels, that, there's community, there's network.
I might argue it's easier. I think it's easier for the women than to identify the Jews around the world who are playing baseball. Of course, now that people know Team Israel exists, it's obviously easier.
Right.
I think it's just creating the pipeline makes sense. You want everything to be sustainable. Nothing is meant to be a flash. It's all meant to be sustainable and replicable and then scalable. So that's so we want to work carefully, and we want to make sure everything's good and what the women deserve and what the fans deserve.
I think you're right. These things are sort of virtuous circle that one feeds into the other. The pros encourage the amateurs, and the amateurs become the pros, and there's more money in development, and every level of it is good for everyone. Do you have a sense of where the teams are going to be at this point, or is that still something that's being worked on? We've
announced northeast of the U.S. There's some flexibility there, but the one, we want to be where the fans want us, and 2, you also have to think about transportation costs. And for now, they'll be traveling by bus, and so we don't want that to be a 12-hour bus ride if we can help it.
That's really interesting. Is there anything you want to talk about in terms of growing up Jewish and growing up Jewish in sports? Did that affect you at all? Was that a difficult aspect of playing baseball, or was it not really talked about that much when you were a kid?
I was a girl who looked like a boy. I was once asked where my yarmulke was.
Wow.
So I would say the biggest impact of being Jewish and sports was having to leave my practices every Tuesday and Thursday to go to Hebrew school.
Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting, a factor that can affect practice times and things like that. We've heard from, pretty much every athlete we've talked to has said at some point or another they felt uncomfortable in a pregame prayer circle. I'm sure that's that something similar has happened to you at some point.
I've had less prayer circles, but it doesn't really bother me. I think being the only girl, the only woman trumps everything else because you already are just fit in. But certainly, my grandfather used to tell me to be proud to be Jewish, and I think you kind of grow up into that, if that makes any sense. I went from hating Hebrew school to wearing Team Israel, and I was very proud to do that.
Well, I think there's some overlap there in terms of feeling like being a bit of an outsider in sports and being a woman in professional baseball. It's a very interesting journey. And it's exciting, I think, for Jewish sports fans, Jewish baseball fans to see that two Jews are involved in making this league happen and creating this new league. I think it's going to be very exciting to watch. So thank you again, Justine, for joining us. It was really great to have you on. And as I said, we'll keep the updates on the Professional Women's Baseball League, and we're excited to see any Jewish baseball players that make it onto the field will be excited to watch as well.
There are girls and women who are Jewish playing baseball. I remember we had one player who would would ask when the games were for Shabbat, so she could try to work around them.
Wow.
There'll definitely be some Jewish pride, on the field and that you can cheer on.
Well, thanks again to Justine for joining us.
And then big thanks to Jamie for soloing that interview.
No problem. Always happy to take care of it. Anyways, really excited to see what the Professional Women's Baseball League has in store, and we'll continue to follow that story. Thanks for listening. As always, we implore you to subscribe to Menschwarmers wherever you get your podcasts. You can find all of our podcasts and occasional writings on the Canadian Jewish News' website, thecjn.ca, and follow us on Twitter at Menschwarmers.
And if you have any, if any of our European listeners want to write in with their understanding or different coverage or maybe personal experience of what happened in Amsterdam, we're all ears because, as I said, our access to on-the-ground Dutch reporting is limited. But we'll hear from any of you and appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, reach out. We're always excited to hear from our listeners. Thanks for listening.